Hey guys, it's your favorite Dinobot here, and welcome to What If Stinger Was in Transformers Prime, a very compelling what if about morality and how even the good guys can actually be corrupted. So, without further ado, hope you guys enjoy this, and this is actually probably going to be one of my longer what ifs. So, our story begins on Cybertron, and basically where Megatron was a gladiator and Orion Pax was a clerk, Stinger was a racer, the best racer, the fastest amongst them. And he grew very popular, always winning every race, no matter the circumstances. Even when people would try to sabotage him or his crew, he would still be able to come out on top and win. However, despite his fame, he would still make time for his brother, Bumblebee, who would actually be in the delivery service, which is kind of more akin to his IDW counterpart, I believe. But he also had other friends, that being Skids, a technician, and Nautica, a bookworm, if you will. She was Barry, a scientist, if you will, I would definitely say. And so the three of them would always hang out, always getting along and always making time for each other, along with Bumblebee. However, the war for Cybertron began, and well, they all chose their side, that being the Autobots. And Stinger would become a lieutenant and the right-hand man of the Elite Guard, along with Skids and Nautica being basically, I guess you could say, under him. And they would all form this tight little crew under the command of Die Atlas. And Die Atlas would basically be Stinger's, I guess you could say, father figure or his Sentinel Prime, except he was more noble and honest. And so they will go on so many missions, succeeding every time. However, one mission in particular actually harmed them the most, and that being the battle for Jahaxis, or the city of Jahaxis, with Devastator. They managed to win and come out on top of it. However, Die Atlas was mortally injured, and with his dying breath, and with obviously a lot of Autobot and Elite Guard witnesses, he would actually promote Stinger as the head of the Elite Guard. Stinger would initially not want this burden, but he understood that he was the only one capable of leading. And so, throughout the war, under the leadership of Zeta Prime, or the Autobots as Zeta Prime's leadership, Stinger, Skids, and Nautica would form this tight crew. And well, Bumblebee would have been a scout at this point still, and Stinger would make sure that he was doing well, but with him being an Elite Guard commander, this did come with the fact that he wasn't seeing Bumblebee as often, but would at the very least contact him to make sure he was okay on the battlefield. Now, Skids and Nautica would be very talented, Skids being a tactician and Nautica being a sniper. However, Stinger never came, lacking any time soon. He always had his plasma blade and the Bloodstorm cannon. The Bloodstorm cannon was pretty much a one-off weapon, or at least a one-time weapon, only used in dire emergencies. And this would be the weapon that Stinger would use to kill Devastator. However, it leaves him exhausted, which is why it's only used in extreme emergencies. And this is where, believe it or not, Stinger would also train a lot of the Elite Guardsmen. We would see him train people like Strongarm, Smokescreen, Trailbreaker, Sunstreaker, and Blaster, basically making the Elite Guard one of the most tight-knit and effective units on Cybertron. But Stinger's tactical mind is what actually gave him the edge. Now, while yes, Skids is his tactician, but that doesn't mean Stinger can't plan and coordinate. He was so effective that entire Decepticon armies could be crumbled within seconds. Not minutes, seconds. However, this got a little bit too good for him. And the High Council was seeing that he was essentially being the Megatron of the battlefield. Unstoppable, controlling, and yet very kind-hearted. But they didn't note that. And so they discussed it with Zeta Prime, and Zeta Prime ultimately agreed. He was too dangerous, even for their side. What if he just somehow upped and left with the Decepticons? So, this is where they orchestrated a ambush. And this would be supposed to be an elite guard convergence mission where they were actually going to pick up a high council member known as Radabat. And so Skids, Nautica, and Stinger would be working with the Wreckers on this one. That being Impactor, Roadbuster, Topspin, and Rotostorm. And initially, Stinger doesn't like this, as again, the Wreckers aren't very, clean. They aren't very, I guess you could say, organized. And this is where Rotostorm pretty much assures him that they'll be following his command throughout the entire mission, so he's got nothing to worry about. Now, again, this is where Nautica, and the rest of them, well, as the guys, pretty much go transform and lead to their location, Nautica does make it clear on their own private communicator that they don't like this. And even Skids, although he doesn't like it, tries to lighten up the mood the best he can. And Stinger simply states, just keep your wits about them, or keep your wits about yourself. Right now, we're just here to retrieve the council member and escort him back to safety. And so the group would actually go to this more abandoned area. I would definitely say it's on the outskirts of Iacon, where, Decepticons patrol frequently, and, well, they would actually be wondering, why the heck is a high council member here? And so, as the three of them are pretty much ahead of the group discussing, this is where Impactor gives Roadbuster a nod, and Roadbuster pulls out his machine gun and begins opening fire. However, this is why these guys are known as some of the best of the best. Their reflexes were sharp, and they immediately dodged Roadbuster and began engaging the Wreckers, showing that it was an ambush. Nautica tried to run to get to a sniper position so that she could get ready. However, Topspin was able to intercept her and almost kills her with a headshot. Skids manages to tackle him out of the way, but again, these guys are Wreckers. They're pretty strong and pretty capable. And so Topspin throws him off, and then Skids is caught in the grasp of Roadbuster. So this is where Stinger pretty much goes in and pretty much I'm going to say he basically does this. Like what you see with Sceptile and Darkrai, he does that to Topspin, but cuts him clean in half, like right down the middle. And so this is where he actually hears Skid screaming as he's crumpled into a ball brutally by Roadbuster. And this leaves him and Nautica absolutely speechless. However, as Nautica tries to process this, she gets shot right through the spark by Rotostorm, who was in his sniper position way beforehand. Because again, keep in mind, Rotostorm is a flyer, and Stinger is absolutely pissed. He begins fighting against all three of them, even almost winning until he is shot right in the back. But instead of dying, he simply falls to his knees and looks over to see Zeta Prime, and he simply asks him, why? Why would you do this? And Zeta simply states, I hereby discharge you from duty. To which he shoots Stinger in the chest again and leaves him there, hoping that, well, he'll just succumb to his wounds and die. And so Stinger kind of looks on as Zeta pretty much congratulates the Wreckers on what they've done and said they did the Autobot cause a noble service. To which this is where he sees all three of them transform and leave. And he's there kind of just looking on in disbelief and horror. However, one good thing has come out of this. And that's the fact that Bumblebee was able to follow his brother, wondering why the heck the Wreckers were with them. They're normally not around the elite guards. And so when he followed them, he saw everything. However, this is where somebody else also appears. And that's Shadow Striker. She comes in doing her usual patrol of the area and finds Stinger and Bumblebee, with Stinger simply stating, take him to Megatron and he will help them in their war efforts. And this is where Shadow Striker simply laughs and points her rifle down at Stinger. And she states, you think she's going to be foolish enough to bring the Autobot Elite Guard commander? And Stinger simply states, apparently I'm no longer that anymore. I thought I was doing the right thing, but now I see that was wrong. And this is where Bumblebee simply chimes in that he was betrayed by them. He's friends over here, and Shadow Strike actually takes a moment to look around at the scene, and it looks very convincing. as easily as, Bumblebee simply explains that he was set up. And so Bumblebee reluctantly does agree that maybe Stinger is better off, if not safer, with the Decepticons. And so Shadow Striker is simply like, okay, well, I'm not going to decide your fate then. But I'm pretty sure Megatron would definitely love to get information out of you. And so she actually helps Stinger up and actually carries him. I guess you could say, like, helps support him as he tries to walk through camp. But we'll fast forward like hours later, and Stinger is on a lab table in front of Megatron, partially repaired. And Megatron simply states that you didn't think it would be that easy, would you? To which Stinger says, look, I'm done with this cause. I'm done with these Autobots. Look, you don't have to believe me if you want to. And this is where he sees Shockwave walk in and simply states, oh, we'll be deciding that today. And so this is where Megatron simply explains that they'll be doing a cortical psychic patch to where they'll be able to see all of his memories, all his details. And well, Stinger simply states, okay, go ahead. And again, keep in mind, Stinger's kind of like really giving up on this point here. Like, it's almost depressing. So when they patch into his memories and see what happened and see that he's telling the truth, Megatron is absolutely in shock because, the Autobots always prided themselves on their moral code and stuff. And then he also sees that it was Zeta to do the deed. And, well, after the cortical psychic patch ends, this is where Megatron simply states, do see to that our new ally is given the best treatment possible and fully repair him. I want him ready for when I actually raid the capital. And so Stinger would get repaired by Shockwave and wake up to see Shadow Striker in front of him. And she simply states, well, how do you feel? Stinger says, better. What do you want? And this is where Shadow Striker states, well, I'm your new partner. Megatron assigned me to essentially keep an eye on you, see if you'll turn heel anytime soon. To which Stinger simply states, yeah, that's not going to happen. So when are they raiding the capital? And that's where we're going to leave it off here, you guys. Please comment down below, like and subscribe, and share with your friends. And Stinger is going to get his get back on Zeta. But the Wreckers, however, are going to have a little bit of a longer run in this one. But hey, let me know what you guys think down below. Please comment, like, and subscribe, and share with your friends. This is Legendary Grimlock, and I hope you guys have a blessed day.